we're going to begin painting our clay masks that you created. So first thing that you need to know is that we're going to work on top of what's called a messy mat. It's a piece of paper that's laminated so that the paint goes on the paper, not the table. There's also a color wheel on here that you can use as a reference if you're trying to mix certain colors. So each student is going to get a styrofoam plate that you're going to use as your paint palette. You need to write your name on the back of that. Use soft hand pressure, because if you press too hard, you can rip through the styrofoam plate, and if you bend these and are too rough, you're going to snap the plate in half, so just be careful with that. Alright, then each student is also going to get a project board and a piece of wax paper to put on top of the project board, and then you're going to be painting on top of that wax paper. And the reason is because as you paint this mask, at the end of the period when it's time to clean up, if this has wet paint on it and you have to pick it up to move it, you're going to be putting fingerprints in your paint. It's easiest to just pick up the board and not touch the wet paint when you go and move that into your cabinet. So that's why we work on top of the project board. Another benefit might be that you get your printed photo out of your cabinet to look at when you start to make your paint colors. If you want to try to match colors exactly, that's fine. If you want to just kind of make up as you go, that's fine with me as well. So here's how I dispense paint in my classroom. Each table number is getting a tray with an egg carton, popsicle sticks, and paint brushes. So if you're the first class to paint, you need to open up the lid, and then what you're going to do is put a popsicle stick inside each paint color. So we are recycling these supplies. If you are not the first class to paint, then your popsicle sticks have dried paint on the surface. Try and just match the color that looks similar so that the black goes back in the black. And that is so that our paints stay pure and not contaminated. Contamination means you are mixing two different colored paints inside the egg carton, and we want the pure color to only be in that egg carton. So if you notice, I had the sticks leaning to the outside edge of the egg carton. That is so it is easy to figure out this is the yellow stick, this is the brown stick. When your sticks all crisscross in the middle, that's when it gets tricky to figure out which stick belongs to which color. So that's why I just say lean them out towards the edge. Okay, so when you are ready to start to paint, what you're going to do is get your plate and figure out what colors do you need to work with. So if I'm going to be painting the head of this character and I want to make similar colors, I know I'm going to need pink, white, and black to get started with to do this face. So I'm going to take that pink popsicle stick, take a scoop, and wipe that on my plate. And then I know I need black, and if you notice, I'm going to put that paint in its own spot on the plate where they're not touching, and I'm going to get some white. And I'm putting my popsicle stick right back in the same color so that contamination does not happen. Then if I need to mix a paint color, I'm going to get a paintbrush from my tray, and I'm going to use the handle of the paintbrush to do the mixing. So for example, if I want to make a light pink, I know that I'm going to always mix the darker color into the lighter color. It will take less paint when you do this. So I'm going to take the handle of my brush, I'm going to scoop a little bit of pink, and I'm going to mix it right into the white. And I can keep adding more pink if I want it to become darker. When I finish, then I'm just going to get my paper towel, and I'm going to wipe off the handle. So I like to make the colors before I actually start to paint with them ahead of time. Maybe I'm going to do a little bit of a reddish, pinkish color. So I'll put some red on my plate, and the red's darker than the pink, so I'm going to put some red in that pink. And then I also might have some pure pink on my plate. So I've got my colors ready to go. Okay, some tips to working with acrylic paint. this is acrylic paint. I cannot guarantee it will wash out of clothes. I would wear an apron. I would push up long sleeves. And then you also have a water bucket at your table that has a giant sponge floating in the water. I would always check that the student before you clean that brush appropriately. I would never use a brush just as it is. I would always rinse the brush on the bottom of the bucket, wipe it on the sponge to verify that it's clean and doesn't have another paint color stuck deep down inside the bristles. And I also like to have my brush a little bit wet. It can help spread the paint colors easier as you're painting your project. Okay, so some tips to know about painting. You always want to hold the paintbrush down low, close to the metal piece that's wrapped around. Instead of way up high on the end, you have more control when you hold it down low. When you are painting, you should load the brush so that the paint is only where the bristles are located. So, some of you, it might benefit you to draw in some marks on your mask before you start to paint if you're not sure where to put your paint color. So in this example, there's this white section on the inside of the head, and everything else is pink around it. So I might sketch in with a pencil where my white is going to be located. Okay, so when I begin to paint, get some white on my plate. I'm going to have a little bit of water on my brush, and I need to choose a brush that's appropriate for the size I'm painting. If I'm painting a large open area, I'm going to get a wider flat brush. If I'm doing real small detail work, then I might get a smaller fine detail brush. But initially, I'm just going to be putting white here and pink here, and I might use a darker pink in some of these spots on the sides. So when I'm painting, again, I'm going to hold the brush close to the metal piece, and I want to paint in large sweeping brush strokes. I'm laying the brush down, and I'm pulling it all the way across the clay. And I can pull away from me or I can pull towards me. But what I'm not doing is pushing the bristles forward. When I push the bristles forward, it's going to smash that paintbrush, and then all these bristles are going to separate at an angle, and it's not going to look as neat on the surface of the clay. So that's why I always want to do these long brush strokes, because it's going to look neater and it's going to take care of the paintbrush, because we don't want the bristles to get misshapen based upon how you're painting. So, some colors might need more than one coat. If it goes on kind of thin, like this pink, I know I'm going to have to do a second coat so that the color is more bold and vibrant. The great thing about acrylic paint is that when it dries, it's permanent, and if I don't like a color that I put on the surface from last class, when the paint's dry, I can just paint right over the top of it, and it will not show the bottom color. But another great benefit to acrylic paint is that if the paint is wet, you can blend colors on the surface of the clay. And I'll show you what I mean. Okay, if I want my paint to change kind of here on this edge, maybe I'm going to start to introduce some of this reddish pinkish color. I can paint that right over the top. And as long as the two colors are wet, they're going to mix and blend. If maybe I want to put a little bit of a light pink on the edge, get some light pink here, can paint that on. And then as I paint towards the other color, they're going to blend together. And that's how you can get a nice gradual color change from one color to the next. But when I'm finished using that color, I'm going to need to clean my paintbrush when I switch colors. So that's what the bucket's for at the table. You're going to swish it around on the bottom of the Tupperware, and then you're going to wipe it across the top of the sponge. The sponge is going to help pull out any extra paint that might be stuck in the bristles, and it dries that brush just slightly. So I always want to double check that I have a clean paintbrush, especially if I'm going to use the white paint. Sometimes I also paint on my skin just to check that the brush is clean before I switch to my white. so that my white really stays its pure color. Students who did 3-dimensional pieces, you also need to paint the side edge of the clay, so you might turn your project and paint the side edges as well. But like I said, acrylic paint dries permanent, so you can paint a new color over the top next class if that's necessary. So like these eyeballs right here, I'll paint black next time. I'm not going to worry that the white paint is covering the eyeball because I'm just going to cover it with black next class once this is dry. So when I grade your project, I'm grading on craftsmanship. How neat did you paint this project? I'm looking to see that you thoroughly covered all the edges of the clay. There should not be any of the original clay still showing. And I'm looking at your craftsmanship. How neat did you paint? Does your paint look sloppy and messy? Did you use the right size paintbrush for your surface area that you were working on? So 20 points of this assignment is coming from your painting. 80 points came from how you sculpted it out of clay. You're getting another 20 points for your painting stage, so that it totals 100 points for the project for the semester. So when you are finished at the end of the period, you need to clean that paintbrush. Wipe it on the bottom, wipe it across the sponge, and then set that on the side of your tray. Then you're going to carefully move this project to your assigned shelf, carrying it with the project board. Then you need to make a decision. What are you going to do with this extra paint on your plate? If it's colors that you've mixed and you want to try to save, we can try to put tinfoil over the top, but really you have to have a thick pile of paint in order for it to save. So like these are nice and thick still. That white though is not thick enough. That's going to dry even with the tinfoil, but you can still try to save paint as best as you can. So I will pass out tinfoil. You're just going to set the tinfoil on top. Fold that back underneath. You should still see your name on the bottom of the plate, and then you're going to keep this plate with your project on your shelf. We do not throw plates away. If you decide that you're done with these colors, or there's not enough paint that's thick enough to save, then what you're going to do at the end of class is you're going to get your paper towel, and you're going to wipe the extra paint off the plate. You're going to go throw that paper towel away, and you're going to save this. All right, so once you've wiped that paint off your plate that you don't need anymore, keep this plate with your project on your shelf. It will dry overnight, and then you can put fresh paint on top of the dry paint next class. So one more thing that I want to teach you. If your paints become contaminated, you need to know how to make that clean again. So if by accident a popsicle stick that belongs in one color touches another color, so for example, if I've used the yellow, I accidentally put the yellow in the green and then realize, oh my gosh, I got green on that stick. Here's how you clean a contamination. You just need to get paper towel, wipe the stick off to get the color off that doesn't belong, then put it in the color that it matches. Then using the popsicle stick where the contamination is, so this light green, I'm going to take this stick and I'm going to scoop underneath the contamination, and I'm going to take that off. If somebody can use this on their project, great, wipe it on a plate. If nobody can use it, then just wipe it off on a paper towel so that stick is clean again, and then stick it back in the color it belongs. So at the end of class, when everybody is done painting, if you are 6th period, the last thing I need you to do is to remove these sticks and set them on the side edge of your tray. So these are going to dry overnight. I can reuse these again tomorrow. Please do your best not to let the sticks touch, because then they glue to each other overnight. And then once all the sticks have been removed, then the last thing that you need to do is shut the lid to the egg carton. And if you notice, I'm putting my sticks kind of on one side of my tray, so that when I shut that lid, and put that on the tray, I can have all my clean paintbrushes off to the side away from where the wet paint is located, because all these sticks are currently wet right now. So if I have these paintbrushes touching the wet sticks, well, now that clean paintbrush has wet paint on it, and then that dries overnight rock hard. So please just try to separate them away from each other so the brushes stay clean, and these can dry overnight. And that's how we're going to do cleanup at the end of every period.